Cal Ransom had learned that some people could look straight at a man and still not see him. They saw the oil under his fingernails, the frayed collar of his sweatshirt, the little girl asleep against his ribs, and they decided the rest of the story for themselves. That March morning, in a polished coffee shop near Boston's seaport, a room full of important people looked at him like he was a stain on the floor. 20 minutes later, when the front windows blew inward and men with suppressed weapons stepped through the smoke, every laugh in the room vanished, and the man they had dismissed as nobody became the only reason any of them lived. The place was called Harbor and Finch, the kind of cafe where the chairs were uncomfortable on purpose, and a small coffee cost more than Cal used to spend on lunch for 2 days. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass and ran in silver threads down the tall windows, blurring the harbor cranes and the gray shapes of office towers beyond them. Inside, the air smelled of dark roast, cinnamon, wet wool, and money. Young executives spoke in low, rehearsed voices about acquisitions and market openings. A pair of attorneys argued over a merger agreement without raising their volume. A woman in a camel coat scrolled through messages on 2 phones at once. Cal sat near the emergency exit under a copper light fixture that hummed faintly above his head, trying not to look as tired as he felt. He had been awake most of the night with his 5-year-old daughter, Junie, who had a fever, a bad dream, and then a long, tearful argument with her stuffed rabbit about whether rabbits could get lonely. He had promised her pancakes after the clinic, but the clinic ran late. The rain got worse, and the bus took 40 minutes to arrive, so he had brought her inside for warm milk and a blueberry muffin. He wore a charcoal hoodie with a torn cuff, faded carpenter pants, and work boots with dried road salt in the seams. His beard needed trimming. His hair had been cut at home with clippers and more hope than skill. There was a pale scar along his left eyebrow, and another, thinner one disappearing beneath the sleeve of his hoodie, but nobody in Harbor and Finch noticed those. They noticed the stain on his shirt, the tired child in his lap, and the old canvas backpack at his feet. Junie was small for her age, with dark curls that refused to stay tied back and solemn brown eyes that could make a grown man confess to things he had not done. She had been brave at the clinic when the nurse checked her ears and throat, and Cal had praised her so seriously that she sat taller afterward, proud of herself. Now she was trying to peel the paper from her muffin in one long strip, concentrating with the intensity of a surgeon. "Careful, Junebug," Cal murmured, steadying the plate before it slid off the tiny table. "I can do it," she said, not looking at him. Her voice was still rough from crying in the night. Cal eased his hand away. "I know you can." The muffin wrapper tore suddenly, the muffin rolled, and her cup of warm milk tipped over before either of them could catch it. Milk spread across the table, poured over the edge, and soaked the front of Cal's hoodie in a wide, pale splash. Junie froze. Her eyes filled at once. "Daddy, I ruined you." Cal grabbed napkins and pressed them against his chest, more concerned about the look on her face than the mess. "You didn't ruin anything," he said softly. "This hoodie was asking for adventure." She blinked at him, deciding whether to believe him. "It looks bad. I've looked worse." That was true in ways he hoped she would never understand. He wiped her hands, then the table, then the floor around his boots, moving with patient care, as if the whole room had narrowed to his daughter and the fragile little storm inside her. A laugh floated from the long marble counter behind him, sharp enough to cut through the cafe's polite hum. "That poor child," a woman said, loud enough to be heard and soft enough to pretend she had not meant it. Cal kept his eyes on the spill. "Seriously," a man answered. "Some people treat public places like bus stations." The woman laughed again. The sweatshirt, the backpack, the whole exhausted dad tragedy. I mean, there are parts of the city for that. Cal folded the wet napkins and set them on the plate. Junie leaned closer to him, sensing the cruelty even if she did not understand every word. "Are they mad?" she whispered. "No," Cal said. "They're just noisy." At the counter, the couple continued performing for each other. The man was maybe 35, with perfect hair, a navy suit, and the restless confidence of someone who had mistaken inheritance for achievement. The woman beside him wore winter-white cashmere and jewelry that flashed whenever she lifted her hand. They were named Preston Vale and Tessa Moreland, though Cal did not know that yet. Preston worked for a private equity firm that bought nursing homes and called the layoffs efficiency. Tessa ran a lifestyle foundation that raised money loudly and gave it away quietly, if at all. They had come to Harbor and Finch because people like them came there, and Cal's presence offended them the way a cracked tile might offend a hotel owner. "He's not even embarrassed," Tessa said. "That's the saddest part." Preston gave a low laugh. Men like that stop noticing. Once life beats you down far enough, standards are the first thing to go. Across the room, Mara Whitcomb heard every word. She sat alone in a corner booth with her back to the wall, a position she had not chosen by accident. At 52, Mara had the stillness of a woman who had spent decades making rooms adjust to her. She was the founder and chief executive of Whitcomb Maritime Systems, a shipping and defense logistics company with contracts that reached from Norfolk to Rotterdam to the Persian Gulf. Her gray hair was cut blunt at her jaw. Her suit was dark green, simple, expensive, and severe. A thin gold wedding band hung on a chain beneath her blouse, though her husband had been gone 12 years. On the table before her sat a tablet filled with port maps, labor projections, and security notes for a federal testimony she was scheduled to give the next morning. She had come in for 10 minutes of quiet before a meeting, but the tired father near the exit had pulled her attention away from cargo lanes and congressional subpoenas. At first she noticed him because of the child. Mara had no children, not because she had not wanted them, but because life had closed that door while she was busy holding other doors open for everyone else. She watched the way Cal lowered his voice when the little girl looked frightened, the way he turned his body to shield her from the room, the way he absorbed embarrassment without passing it down to her. Then she noticed something else. He did not move like a beaten man. Even exhausted, even soaked in milk, he conserved motion with unnerving precision. When a cup shattered near the espresso machine, every other person flinched. Cal's eyes moved first, then his shoulders, then nothing. He had located the sound, judged it harmless, and returned to his daughter before anyone else finished reacting. Mara's security chief, Lennox Bell, stood outside in a black Suburban at the curb, and the message that appeared on her phone came from him. "Leave now." Unmarked panel van circling twice. Possible surveillance. Mara looked through the rain-streaked window. Traffic crawled along the street. Delivery trucks idled with hazard lights blinking. Pedestrians hunched beneath umbrellas. She typed one word: coming. When she glanced back toward the exit, Cal Ransom was no longer wiping milk from his hoodie. His hand rested on Junie's back, fingers spread lightly between her shoulder blades. His head was turned toward the street. His expression had emptied, not into fear, but into a kind of clean, terrible focus. Mara followed his gaze and saw the van. It was dark gray, almost black under the rain, easing past the front of the cafe too slowly for traffic and too deliberately for a lost driver. There were no company markings, no plates she could see. The rear windows were tinted so deeply they reflected the city like oil. The van stopped at the curb. Its side door remained closed for 2 seconds, 3, 4. In those seconds, Cal leaned close to his daughter and whispered, "Junebug, we're going to play quiet turtle." "Now?" she asked. "Right now." His voice made the child obey before she could argue. He lifted her from his lap, keeping her low against his body, and moved toward the narrow space between the emergency exit alcove and a heavy concrete planter filled with a rubber tree. To anyone else, he might have looked like a frightened father hiding. Preston noticed and laughed outright. "Look at that! He heard us and ran behind a plant." Tessa raised her phone a little, amused. "This is actually unbelievable." Cal settled Junie behind the planter, crouched so his eyes were level with hers, and placed one finger gently against his lips. "Look at the wall. Hands over ears. Do not come out until I say your name twice." Junie's chin trembled. "Are you mad?" "Never at you," he said. "Quiet turtle." She nodded, pressed her small palms over her ears, and faced the wall. The van door slid open. 4 men stepped out into the rain. They wore dark jackets, gloves, and soft-soled tactical boots that did not match the morning crowd. Their faces were covered from the nose down, not with cheap masks, but with fitted fabric designed for movement. Cal saw the shape beneath their jackets and knew what the room did not yet know. Compact weapons, body armor, professional spacing. Not thieves, not desperate men. A team. His mind sorted distance, angles, exits, civilians, glass, hard cover, soft cover, child. He had spent 9 years in places where decisions had to be made before fear arrived: Kandahar before sunrise, a safe house in Tripoli, a cargo vessel off the coast of Djibouti, a mountain road in a country whose name never appeared in his discharge papers. He had buried that life after his wife, Elise, died in a hospice room that smelled of antiseptic and lavender lotion, gripping his hand with the little strength she had left and making him promise that Junie would grow up knowing bedtime stories, not folded flags. He had kept the promise as best he could. He fixed diesel engines. He repaired loading dock doors. He took night shifts plowing snow when the city needed extra drivers. He swallowed pride, skipped meals, and learned which grocery stores marked down bread after 8 o'clock. He had not drawn a weapon in years. He had not wanted the old part of himself to have any reason to breathe. Then the men came through the door, and the promise changed shape. Peace was no longer staying harmless. Peace was keeping his child alive. The first shot was suppressed, but indoors it still cracked like a board snapping. A ceiling light burst. People screamed and dropped. Ceramic cups shattered. A barista fell behind the counter, sobbing. The 4 men entered in a staggered line, weapons high, scanning with discipline. "Down!" one barked. His accent was hard to place, flattened by training. "Faces down! Hands visible!" Preston Vale made a sound like a wounded animal and shoved Tessa aside in his scramble behind the counter stools. Tessa hit her shoulder against the marble and cried out, her phone skidding away under a table. Mara stood halfway out of her booth, caught in open space, her tablet still in one hand. 2 of the gunmen turned toward her at once. There it was. Target. One of them spoke into a throat mic. "Whitcomb located." Mara's face changed, not into panic, but into the recognition of a woman who had calculated risk and still underestimated how ugly it could become. The nearest attacker moved toward her, grabbing her upper arm and twisting it behind her back. The second covered the room, sweeping his weapon across terrified patrons. Cal remained behind the alcove, one knee on the tile, his right hand closing around the cast-iron base of the small table he had dragged with him when he moved Junie. Heavy. Awkward. Good enough. He waited one breath longer, because timing mattered more than courage. The covering gunman stepped past the concrete planter, muzzle turning toward the corner where Junie hid. Cal's face did not change. Something inside him went silent. He came out low and fast, not like a man starting a fight, but like weather arriving. The iron table base struck the covering gunman at the side of the knee with a dull, brutal sound. The man collapsed before he could understand why the floor had vanished beneath him. Cal drove his shoulder into the attacker's ribs, used the man's falling weight to turn the weapon away from the room, and slammed the heel of his hand under the chin. The gunman's head snapped back. Cal stripped the weapon free and rode him down, pinning the trigger hand with one boot until bones shifted. The second man, the one holding Mara, turned sharply and dragged her in front of him as a shield. Cal did not fire. He never even raised the weapon fully. He threw the empty table frame instead, not at the man's head, but at his hands. The frame spun once and smashed into the attacker's wrist. Mara felt the grip loosen and dropped hard to the floor, rolling under her booth with more instinct than grace. Cal crossed the distance in 2 strides. The attacker swung the barrel toward him. Cal moved inside it, caught the sling, wrapped it across the man's forearm, and drove his forehead into the bridge of the attacker's nose. There was a wet crack. The man staggered. Cal turned his hips and sent him into the edge of the marble counter so hard the espresso cups stacked there jumped and rang like bells. The third gunman opened fire from the front. Cal pulled the second attacker down as cover, fired twice from behind him, and hit the third man's center mass. The fourth retreated toward the door, reaching into his jacket for something Cal did not intend to identify later. Cal fired once. The man's shoulder jerked back. A small black device flew from his hand and skittered across the floor. Cal fired again, low, breaking the man's leg before he reached the van. Outside, the driver abandoned the team, tires hissing on wet pavement as the vehicle lurched away into traffic. For a moment after the last shot, the cafe held its breath. Steam hissed from the espresso machine. Rain tapped the broken window glass. Someone whimpered beneath a table. Cal stood near the center of the room with the stolen weapon angled toward the floor, his milk-soaked hoodie marked now with dust and blood that was not his. He scanned the ceiling, the kitchen door, the street, the restrooms, the reflections in the glass. His breathing remained even. Only when he was certain no fifth man waited in the room did he lower the weapon and step back toward the planter. Mara, on the floor beneath her booth, stared at him with a kind of disbelief she had not felt since she was a young woman watching a crane collapse at the first port she ever managed. Lennox Bell burst through the damaged doorway seconds later with his pistol raised, followed by 2 plain-clothed security men. He was broad, bald, and former Massachusetts State Police, a man who had built his career on command presence. "Ms. Whitcomb!" he shouted. "I'm here," Mara answered, her voice steady but thin. Lennox looked from her to the men on the floor to Cal, and whatever order he had meant to give died in his throat. Cal had already set the weapon on a table out of Junie's sight. He knelt and said softly, "Junie, Junie." The little girl turned. Her hands were still clamped over her ears, cheeks wet. But she had obeyed. Cal gathered her against his chest and closed his eyes for half a second. The room watched the terrible man become a father again. "Is Quiet Turtle over?" she whispered. "It's over," he said. "You did perfect." Sirens rose in the distance. The sound snapped people back into themselves. Tessa crawled from behind a chair, shaking so violently her bracelet rattled against the floor. Preston tried to stand and could not. When Cal passed them with Junie pressed against his shoulder, Preston looked up at him. His face was gray with fear and shame. Cal did not stop. He did not glare. He did not say the line a smaller man might have said. He simply stepped around the broken cups and carried his daughter toward the exit. Lennox moved into his path. "Sir, you need to stay right here." Cal's eyes settled on him. They were pale hazel, almost colorless under the copper lights, and empty in a way Lennox had seen only twice in his life, both times after shootings. "My daughter has a fever," Cal said. "She has seen enough. Police are coming. Then they can come to me later." Lennox tightened his jaw, but Mara appeared beside him, one hand pressed to her bruised arm. "Let him pass," she said. Mara, this is an active... Let him pass. Her voice left no room. Then she looked at Cal. Mr. Ransom. He paused, surprised she knew his name. She gestured toward the old canvas backpack near his table, where the clinic paperwork stuck out of the side pocket. You saved my life. Let me make sure the law understands that before it mistakes you for something else. Cal shifted Junie's weight. I don't need anything. That is rarely said by people who need nothing. Mara took a card from her coat and held it out. My counsel will meet the police. My driver will take you and your daughter wherever you need to go. No precinct, no handcuffs, no reporters near her. You have my word. Cal looked at the card, then at Junie, whose forehead had grown hot against his neck. Pride was a luxury. A sick child was not. He took the card. By evening, Cal was sitting in a private medical suite at Mass General, while Junie slept under a clean blanket with a cartoon turtle printed on it. Her fever had broken. A nurse had brought apple juice, crackers, and a stuffed seal from the pediatric floor. Outside the door stood one of Mara's security men, not intruding, simply making sure no reporter came close. Cal had already spoken to 2 detectives with Mara's attorney beside him, a woman named Celia Brandt who wore black-rimmed glasses and treated every question as if it had better behave. The detectives had seen the cafe footage. They knew what he had done. They also knew enough not to push when federal agents arrived and quietly took possession of the attacker's weapons and phones. Cal hated every second of it. Attention felt like a spotlight on old wounds. When Mara entered the suite near 9 o'clock, she had changed into a dark wool coat. Though there was still a faint bruise rising along her wrist where the attacker had grabbed her, Cal stood automatically. Mara noticed. Please, she said, your daughter's asleep. He sat again, but not comfortably. Mara pulled a chair near the window. Boston glittered beyond the glass, wet rooftops and red taillights stretching into the dark. I had people look into you, she said. I assumed you would. The public version is boring. Army mechanic, later private contractor, medically retired, widower, father. The sealed version is less boring. Cal said nothing. I won't ask what you cannot answer, Mara continued. But I will say this. The men in that cafe belonged to a network my company has been tracking for 6 months. They call themselves Veyer Group. Former military, former intelligence, mostly deniable work for corporations and governments willing to pretend they do not know what they bought. I am scheduled to testify tomorrow about port security vulnerabilities and illegal routing in defense shipments. Someone wanted me frightened, or gone. Cal leaned back, eyes on Junie. Then cancel. No. Then double your security. I did. They cut through it. Then hire better people. Mara studied him. That is why I'm here. Cal gave a humorless breath. No. You have not heard the offer. Doesn't matter. It might. He looked at her then, and there was weariness in him deeper than lack of sleep. Mrs. Whitcomb, whatever you think you saw today, that is not my life anymore. Miss Whitcomb, she corrected gently, and I saw exactly enough. Cal's jaw tightened. My wife died asking me to come home all the way. Not halfway, not on weekends. All the way. I'm not bringing that kind of work near my daughter. Mara folded her hands, accepting the weight of that before she spoke again. My husband died believing work would wait until he had time for life. It did not. So I won't insult you with speeches about duty. I will speak plainly. You are already near danger because danger found you in a coffee shop. You are also living in a first-floor apartment with a faulty lock, working jobs that leave you exhausted, and choosing between medical bills and groceries more often than your pride wants to admit. Cal's eyes flashed. Careful. I am being careful, Mara said. That is why I am offering you control instead of charity. Build my security architecture for the next 90 days. Not as a bodyguard standing beside me in photographs. As director. You choose the team, the routes, the protocols, the safe sites. You answer only to me. In return, your daughter receives full medical coverage, private housing in a secure building, school placement when she is ready, and enough compensation that you never again have to calculate the cost of a fever." The room went quiet except for Junie's soft breathing and the distant beep of a monitor in the hall. Mara's voice softened. "You can call it a job. You can call it a wall between her and the world. But do not call poverty peace simply because it is familiar." That sentence hurt him, and Mara saw it. Cal looked down at his hands. They were clean now, but the scars remained, pale lines across knuckles and palms, a map of old decisions. He thought of Elise in her final week, smiling at Junie from a hospital bed while pain hollowed out her face. He thought of the envelope of unpaid bills in the kitchen drawer, the landlord's patient but narrowing kindness, the way Junie's winter coat sleeves were getting too short. He thought of the cafe, of men coming through the door while his daughter hid behind a plant. Peace was not the absence of violence. Sometimes peace needed locks, plans, money, and people awake through the night. "3 conditions," he said finally. Mara did not smile, though relief moved through her eyes. "Name them." "My daughter is never used for leverage. Not by you, not by your company, not by anybody connected to this." "Agreed." "I choose who watches her." "Agreed." "And if their group comes again, we don't just survive the next attempt, we expose whoever paid them." Mara's expression hardened. "That was always my intention." Cal looked back at Junie. "1 more. That makes 4. I don't wear a suit unless I have to." For the first time that day, Mara almost laughed. "I suspect we can survive that." 3 months changed the shape of Cal's life without changing the center of it. He and Junie moved into a secure apartment in Charlestown with thick doors, good windows, and a view of tugboats moving through the harbor. Junie's new nanny, Mrs. Odette Pike, looked like a retired librarian and baked ginger cookies every Friday. But she had once trained embassy evacuation teams and could disassemble a pistol blindfolded. Junie adored her. Cal worked from a converted office 2 floors below Mara's penthouse, building maps, schedules, redundancies, and quiet traps. He replaced half of Mara's security staff and retrained the other half. Lennox Bell resisted at first because proud men do not enjoy discovering the difference between competent and exceptional. But Cal never humiliated him. He corrected quietly, demonstrated once, and gave credit in public. That earned Lennox's respect faster than dominance would have. Mara watched this too. She had hired many powerful men in her life. Most announced themselves. Cal did not. He noticed hinges, exits, reflections, pauses in conversation, the hand that did not belong in a pocket. He also noticed when the night janitor's son needed a summer job, when an analyst cried in the stairwell after a divorce, when Mara forgot to eat for 12 hours and found a sandwich on her desk without explanation. He did not become warm exactly, but he became present. Junie bloomed in the safety. Her cheeks filled out. She stopped asking whether bills were grown-up scary. She learned to ride a scooter in the building's underground garage on rainy days, while Cal walked beside her with one hand hovering near the handlebars and the other holding coffee gone cold. The public knew almost none of this. They knew only that Mara Whitcomb had survived an attempted abduction and was still testifying before Congress, still pushing for audits that threatened a profitable shadow world built around shipping manifests and defense contracts. Veyer Group vanished from obvious channels. That did not reassure Cal. Professionals did not disappear because they were ashamed. They disappeared because they were planning. The second attempt came not in a cafe, not in daylight, and not with the blunt confidence of the first. It came on the night of the Whitcomb Foundation's annual Harbor Gala, held inside the restored Atlantic Exchange, a historic customs house turned event hall with arched windows, marble staircases, and a glass roof overlooking the black water. Mara refused to cancel. The gala raised money for families of merchant mariners lost at sea, and canceling would send the market, the press, and her enemies the same message. Fear had become policy. Cal did not argue once he saw she had made the decision. He simply turned the building into a net. The waitstaff were vetted twice. The musicians arrived through a secure entrance. The flower arrangements were checked for devices. A medical team waited in an unmarked room off the kitchen. Lennox controlled the exterior perimeter. Cal positioned plainclothes operators among donors, bartenders, photographers, and maintenance workers. On paper, the evening looked elegant. Underneath, it was wire under silk. Cal hated the tuxedo. It fit perfectly, which somehow made him resent it more. He stood in the shadow of the upper balcony, one hand resting near the railing, watching the gala unfold below. Chandeliers glowed above long tables dressed in white linen. A string quartet played near the staircase. Donors in black tie laughed too loudly and drank champagne too quickly. Mara moved among them with composed grace, accepting condolences she did not need and admiration she did not seek. Near the seafood station, Cal saw two familiar faces from Harbor and Finch. Preston Vale and Tessa Moreland had apparently purchased seats at a sponsor table. Preston wore a burgundy dinner jacket and had regained enough arrogance to tell a story with both hands. Tessa's diamonds flashed beneath the warm lights. Cal looked at them and felt nothing. Their judgment had once been unpleasant weather. Now it was background noise. His attention moved to the table beside Mara's, where Everett Sloane, Whitcomb Maritime's chief financial officer, sat with a glass of untouched bourbon. Everett was 60, silver-haired, polished, and beloved by board members who mistook caution for wisdom. Cal had disliked him from the beginning, not because he was rude, he was unfailingly courteous, but because his fear never matched the room. Tonight, it did. Everett checked his watch too often. His left hand trembled when his phone vibrated. He smiled half a second too late whenever Mara looked his way. "Lennox," Cal said quietly into his cuff mic. "Where is Sloane's driver?" "Checking," Lennox answered. A pause. "Driver called in sick 2 hours ago. Replacement cleared through Sloane's office." Cal's eyes stayed on Everett. "Find the replacement." "On it." Cal moved along the balcony, descending the side stairs without hurry. Panic traveled faster when chased. He reached the service corridor behind the ballroom and passed a waiter carrying oysters. The waiter gave the smallest nod, one of Cal's. In his earpiece, Lennox came back, voice lower now. "Replacement driver's credentials are clean but thin. Too thin. Vehicle is in the west loading bay. Lock down exits quietly. Copy." Cal turned a corner and saw Everett Sloane standing near a staff door, speaking into his phone with his back half turned. "No delays," Everett whispered. "She speaks in 18 minutes. Cal stepped into view. Everett ended the call too quickly and smiled. "Cal, you startled me." "Did I? I was looking for the restroom. That door leads to refrigeration." Everett's smile thinned. In the ballroom, applause rose as the foundation chair introduced Mara. Her voice came through the speakers, calm and resonant, thanking the families of mariners, speaking of duty, weather, and the people who kept a nation supplied without being seen. Cal watched Everett's face as he listened. The CFO did not look guilty. He looked trapped. That was worse. A guilty man might bargain. A trapped man might burn everything down. The lights went out during Mara's second paragraph, not all at once. First the chandeliers flickered, then the wall sconces died, then the glass roof above the ballroom went black against the rainy sky. The emergency lights glowed red along the exits. A few guests laughed nervously, expecting the power to return. Cal had already drawn his weapon beneath the fold of his jacket. "Phoenix," he said into the mic. The word moved through the building faster than the darkness. Doors magnetized. Elevators froze. Plainclothes operators shifted into position. Mara stepped back from the microphone exactly as rehearsed, guided by the foundation chair toward the protected side of the stage. Then the glass roof cracked. It did not explode inward as amateurs might imagine. A shaped charge cut a clean oval above the center of the ballroom, and ropes dropped through rain and glittering fragments. 4 figures descended in black harnesses. At the same time, 2 men in catering uniforms came through the kitchen doors with weapons pulled from beneath rolling linen carts. The room erupted. Chairs scraped, glasses fell. Someone screamed Mara's name. Preston Vale dove beneath a table so quickly he pulled the tablecloth down over himself, sending plates and candles crashing across the floor. Tessa crouched beside him, sobbing into her hands. On the stage, Mara did not run blindly. She lowered herself behind the reinforced podium Cal had insisted on, her face pale but controlled. Their group expected surprise. Instead, they landed inside a plan. The violinist nearest the staircase dropped her instrument and pulled a compact weapon from beneath the music stand. The bartender behind the west bar hit a switch that flooded the center of the ballroom with white light, blinding the descending attackers while leaving Cal's team in shadow. Lennox's men sealed the kitchen doors behind the 2 false caterers. Cal moved toward the stage through the chaos, not fighting the crowd but flowing through the gaps it made. One attacker cut himself free from the rope and raised his rifle toward Mara's position. Cal fired once, striking the man's shoulder and spinning him away from the stage. Another turned toward the guests, perhaps to create hostages, perhaps to create panic. Cal closed on him from the side, caught the rifle barrel, and slammed it down into the edge of a table. The weapon discharged into the floor. Cal drove his elbow into the man's throat, swept his leg, and took him down behind a fallen chair. A woman screamed inches from Cal's ear. He did not hear it as sound, only as information. Civilian close, move left. He moved left. Lennox's voice snapped in his ear. 2 in kitchen secured, 1 on roof running north. Let him reach the stairwell, Cal said. He'll lead us. Copy. Everett Sloan appeared near the side exit, face slick with sweat, trying to slip through a door that should have been locked. Cal saw the access card in his hand, saw the red light turn green, and understood. The traitor had not merely opened a door, he had built himself an escape route. Cal caught him in the corridor outside the ballroom. Everett stumbled when Cal seized the back of his jacket and drove him against the wall. The older man gasped, hands raised. They have my son, Everett said, before Cal could speak. The words came out broken. They sent me videos. They said if I didn't help. Cal pressed his forearm across Everett's chest, not choking him, only keeping him still. Where? I don't know. They moved him twice. Please. He's 24. He has nothing to do with this. Cal stared into Everett's terrified eyes and saw no performance there. A weak man, yes. A compromised man. Not the architect. What did you give them? Routes, schedules, access credentials. I delayed the audit. I didn't know they would attack the cafe. I swear to God, I didn't know there would be a child there. That landed somewhere Cal did not show. Junie's face flashed in his mind, small hands over her ears. His grip tightened, then eased. You should have come to us. Everett began to cry. I was ashamed. From the ballroom came 2 more shots, then Lennox's voice. Interior secure. Roof runner contained in stairwell B. Cal leaned close to Everett. Listen to me. Shame is expensive. Your son may still be alive, but only if you stop lying right now. Everett nodded frantically. There's a phone, in my jacket. They call from blocked numbers, but there's an app hidden under a calculator. Cal took the phone, passed it to one of his techs, and pushed Everett toward a waiting guard. Protective custody. He talks to federal agents after we get the son. Everett grabbed Cal's sleeve. You'll try? Cal looked at the hand until Everett released him. For him, Cal said. Not for you. By midnight, the gala had become a federal crime scene, and the city's wealthy had learned what fear did to posture. Guests were wrapped in emergency blankets. Reporters shouted from behind police barricades. Mara gave a statement with rain still shining on the broken glass roof behind her. She did not mention Cal by name. She spoke of law enforcement, brave staff, and the families the foundation served. But when she stepped away from the microphones, she found him near a side entrance, speaking quietly with Lennox and 2 federal agents. "Everett?" she asked. "Compromised," Cal said. "Not clean, not fully willing either. They took his son." Pain crossed Mara's face. Everett had worked beside her for 19 years. Betrayal was simpler when it came without grief attached. "Can we find him? We have a lead." She studied Cal. "You're going after him." "Yes. This is beyond your contract." Cal looked through the open door toward the wet street, where police lights flashed red across puddles. "A father is a father." Mara absorbed that, then nodded once. "Take whatever you need." He almost smiled. "I already did." The rescue did not make the news. It happened before dawn in a shuttered cold storage warehouse outside Fall River, where the air smelled of fish, rust, and old concrete. Cal went in with Lennox, 3 of his hand-picked operators, and federal agents waiting 2 blocks away because warrants and jurisdiction moved slower than a frightened man's heartbeat. Everett's son, Graham Sloan, was found zip-tied to a chair in an office with a space heater pointed at his legs and a hood over his head. 2 guards surrendered when they realized the shadows in the room had weapons and patience. 1 did not surrender and lived to regret the delay. Cal cut the zip ties himself. Graham was bruised, dehydrated, terrified, and alive. When the young man sobbed for his father, Cal looked away for a moment, giving him privacy in the only way the room allowed. By sunrise, federal agents had enough names, devices, accounts, and recorded calls to pull the Veyer network into daylight. Arrests began in Boston, New York, Rotterdam, and Virginia. The rival executives who had hired them discovered that distance did not protect a man from evidence. Everett Sloan took a plea and testified. He lost his position, his reputation, and most of the life he had known. But his son sat in the courtroom behind him, alive. And sometimes mercy looks like having to answer for what you did. Weeks later, Harbor and Finch reopened with new glass, new locks, and a brass plaque near the entrance honoring the staff and patrons who had survived. Cal did not attend the reopening ceremony, though Mara invited him. He had a parent meeting at Junie's school and considered that more important. But on a clear Saturday in May, he brought Junie back to the neighborhood because she wanted to see the seals at the aquarium and insisted they stop afterward for a muffin with no dangerous milk. The cafe was quieter than before. The staff recognized him immediately but did not make a scene. A young barista with kind eyes wrote "Quiet Turtle" on Junie's cup of cocoa, and Junie laughed so hard she nearly spilled it. Cal wore clean jeans, a gray jacket, and the same scuffed boots. He still looked ordinary, which suited him. Mara arrived 10 minutes later, not by accident, though she pretended it was. She carried a small gift bag for Junie, a stuffed turtle wearing a tiny raincoat. Junie named it Admiral Pickle, before anyone could object. They sat at the same small table near the emergency exit, now repaired, and for a while they spoke of school, aquarium seals, and whether turtles could be brave if they moved slowly. "Slow can be brave," Cal told Junie. "Sometimes slow means you're thinking." Mara smiled into her coffee. Preston Vale and Tessa Moreland entered just before noon. They saw Cal at once. Their conversation stopped mid-sentence. Preston's face changed first, recognition draining the color from it. Tessa looked at the table, the child, Mara Whitcomb sitting with them, and then at the floor. Cal noticed them because he noticed everything, but he gave no sign beyond a brief glance. Preston approached after several long seconds, carrying shame awkwardly, like a package he did not know where to set down. "Mr. Ransom," he said. His voice lacked all the old polish. "I owe you an apology." Cal looked up. Junie leaned against his arm, busy introducing Admiral Pickle to her muffin. Preston swallowed. "What I said that day was cruel. Cowardly, really. I judged you without knowing anything about you. Then you saved us anyway." Tessa stood beside him with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I think about it a lot." Cal studied them for a moment. In another life, anger might have felt useful. In this one, with his daughter warm beside him and sunlight finally touching the floor where broken glass had once been, anger felt like a debt he did not want to collect. "Don't teach yourself to be sorry only after you're scared," he said. His voice was quiet, not unkind. "Practice earlier." Preston nodded, eyes lowered. Tessa wiped her cheek. They returned to the counter without another word. Junie looked up at her father. "Were they in trouble?" Cal tore a piece from her muffin and set it on a napkin. "No, Bug. They were learning." "Did you teach them?" He smiled faintly. "Not on purpose." That evening, Cal stood at the window of the Charlestown apartment while Junie slept in the next room, Admiral Pickle tucked under her chin. The harbor was dark blue. The last light stretched thin over the water. Behind him, the apartment was quiet except for the dishwasher humming and Mrs. Pike moving softly in the kitchen before heading home. On the table lay Junie's drawing from school. It showed 3 figures: a small girl, a tall man with square shoulders, and a turtle the size of a truck. Above them, in careful kindergarten letters, Junie had written, "My dad keeps the scary away." Cal touched the paper with 2 fingers. He thought of Elise, as he did every night, and wondered whether he had kept the promise or changed it beyond recognition. He was not harmless. He never would be. But he was home for breakfast. He packed lunches. He knew which pajamas Junie liked when it rained and which song helped her sleep after a nightmare. He had built a wall between her and the worst parts of the world, not out of rage, but out of love. That would have to be enough. Mara had once told him that invisible people hold the country together: drivers, mechanics, dock workers, nurses, guards, fathers half asleep on buses with children in their arms. Cal believed that. He had been invisible most of his life, and invisibility had taught him more than pride ever could. People could laugh at worn boots, tired eyes, and a stained sweatshirt. They could mistake restraint for weakness and silence for defeat. But truth had a way of entering a room without raising its voice. And when it did, the loudest people often had nothing left to say. Sometimes the greatest shield in the room is wearing frayed sleeves and carrying a sleepy child, and we never notice until the glass breaks. Cal Ransom walked into harbor and Finch invisible. The oil beneath his nails, the backpack at his feet, and the milk stain on his hoodie became a mirror for other people's prejudice. Yet when trained gunmen tore through the cafe, it was that same nobody who moved like weather, placed his daughter behind cover, and stood between strangers and certain death. In a world obsessed with titles, labels, and curated images, Cal reminds us that dignity is forged in the dark, long before an audience arrives. Character, not cosmetics, decides who we are when the alarm sounds, and kindness, quiet and unshowy, is never wasted on those too blind to see it. The next time you feel tempted to measure someone by their wardrobe, bank account, or the circles under their eyes, remember the father who taught a terrified little girl quiet turtle and then protected an entire room. You never know which unseen hero is sitting beside you right now. Did this story stir something in you? Drop your biggest takeaway in the comments so we can learn from each other. And if you love real-life lessons wrapped in powerful storytelling, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next.